Well, good morning, you guys. It's good to see you. But um, so, uh, Miss Kim asked if I would share some of my testimony and just moments where uh, the Lord kind of showed up, even up to the last moment, if you will. Um, just answer prayers, but I think sometimes God answers prayers we don't even know to pray, right? And sometimes it's because He's answering the prayers of others, and so over us. And so I wanted to share that with you. But a verse that my grandparents gave um, to me when I was younger was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths." And those were life verses given, assigned to me, if you will, at birth by my grandparents, and it's what they've prayed over me ever since. In fact, my grandpa built small wooden boxes where that would be where our Christmas presents were. He'd put them inside of there, or when we would come over to their house, he would put a toy or a piece of candy. But it caused us every single time to go and have to read that verse before we were able to open. And so each of us grandkids had a verse that like we had to read and read multiple times a week just because of their influence. And um, it was what they prayed over us. And so I think a large part of my testimony is not just answer to prayers that I've prayed, but prayers of my grandparents, prayers of my parents. And so um, my life began in Arkansas. That's where I was born and raised. Northeast corner, about as close to Indiana as you can get. And was born and raised there, never moved. I think we may have had two houses growing up, so pretty stable home. I was homeschooled all the way through, so never had to transition from school to school. Like I had a very stable childhood. Grew up going to church, but in between me and my brother, I have one brother and two sisters that are younger than me. In between me and my brother, my mom had two miscarriages. And a part of the church we were going to, when she brought my younger brother at the time to the nursery, the lady said, well, maybe if you got rid of the sin in your life, you wouldn't have had those miscarriages. They ended up leaving that church and joining into a Calvary chapel in the area. And so I was raised in a Calvary chapel. From the time I was 2 till I graduated, I was in a Calvary chapel. The worship pastor was probably one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And so I wanted to be just like him. Like he was charismatic, he was fun, he was all the things that even as a young kid, I was just like, that's not who I am, but like, he's cool. I want to be like him. If he wore a green, suit jacket, that's what I wanted for Easter too. Like, but one Sunday he was finishing up and said, hey, if you don't want to go to hell, you should come up and get saved. And that was his altar call. And I realize now going back, that's probably not the best way to go about like asking someone if they want to get saved, but it was how it was proposed to me. And I looked at my mom at 7, 8 years old and I said, I don't want to go to hell. And so I walked up, but essentially what I wanted was fire insurance. I wanted to be able to not go to hell. I didn't understand what it meant to have a relationship with the Lord. And so when I was told, you repent, I was like, well, if that's what I have to do to not go to hell, then that's what I'll do. And I think I would have done pretty much anything because that was just what was told to me. It's like, if you don't want to go to hell, here's what you do. So that's what I did. Got baptized, but none of it was legitimate at all to me in my heart. And I know that because when I was around 11 or 12, I was a part of a VBS, and a lady named Yolanda like shared her testimony and how she had gotten saved just because she didn't want to go to hell. She had no understanding what a relationship with Jesus looked like. And so I was like that. It was one of those times where it was just directly spoken right at me, it felt like. Even though it was a room of 30, 40 people, I felt like she was talking to me. So I went straight to my pastor and I was like, I did it wrong. I don't have a clue what this actually means. And I realize now that like I'm lost, like truly. And so got saved truly in realizing that like I needed a relationship with the Lord and I wanted to know the Lord. Got baptized and started kind of walking through life. And again, that was around 11 or 12. Started to fall in love with sports, basketball, all the things. And but at that time, my walk with the Lord had really just kind of stopped being justified. And the sanctification started to take place from that point on, in the sense of where all my friends, I had always been one of the taller ones as a younger kid. I stopped growing. I started gaining weight. I started going through kind of the awkward phases, right? And all my friends got taller and kept playing basketball. And I went from starting to sitting the bench to eventually, by the end of high school, basically just being lucky that I had a seat on the bench because we didn't even have tryouts. Like if there would have been tryouts, it probably would have been first cut. Um, I had viewed in my life um, the relationship with the Lord as being dependent based on more of your position. And so I looked at my life and said, I'm messed up and I'm a sinner, and I'm told regularly by my parents that I am a sinner. I was very well aware of my sin, and it was dealt with. But then I'd look at my parents and I'd go, well, they're my parents and they are adults. Like they're not going to sin like I do. I don't see them sin as often as I do. I know my heart, and I know when I lie, and I know when I'm angry, and I know when I'm sinning, and I don't see that in them. So, but I'm not an adult. We're just different. And then I'd look at my pastor and I would be like, there's kind of another level where it's like, I never see him. And he knows way more about the Bible and all these different things. And I just kind of had a tier system in my head of like, here's what this kind of looks like. And so when I was 13, 14, around that age, my pastor approached me one time and he was like, hey, I want to start discipling. I don't have a clue what that means, but he was like, I just want to take a group of you guys in the youth group and start meeting with you weekly and just pouring God's word into you. And I thought, well, if I'm meeting with the pastor, then that kind of gets me good credit with people like parents and the people that matter to impress and all this stuff like that would be good. If I'm saying I meet with them, like this is awesome. So started to meet with him, and I got a dose of reality because I realized like I had no excuse for my sin because he started sharing with me his struggles. He started sharing with me his life. He shared his testimony, how he grew up hating God, all these different things. And I just realized I am without excuse for my lifestyle. And I know I was homeschooled. I lived a good life. I did all the right things. I had the right mindset, all the right things, read my Bible daily. Like that was part of it. Um, but I had no clue what it meant to have a living and walking relationship with the Lord. And so that was revealed to me in that. And I truly became broken of my sin, wept for my sin. And there was perhaps a moment, but it felt more like a month or two where it was just brokenness over my sin. Unfortunately, that kind of led to more legalism in some sense where it didn't resolve well. I went to, well, I need to have a good week. I need to have a good month. And so when I'd have a good week, it was the greatest. And when I had a bad week, I hated life. I hated being a disappointment to the Lord. I hated being a disappointment to my family. And I thought like life would be better off if I wasn't here. And I started to deal with that idea of just, well, if I wasn't here, I'd be with the Lord and I wouldn't struggle with sin. I hate sin and I don't want to sin anymore. I'm done with it. And so I wanted to take my own life, and started from a young age, right around 14, 15, with dealing with suicidal thoughts, and it was daily. In fact, one twisted way that when suicide, depression, these things just get a hold of your mind, and I'm sure if you've dealt with it, you understand. But if not, for my wife, someone that's never really dealt with it, this was like how could you believe this? But I'd make rules with myself of like, I won't do it in this context, or I would never do it where my family would find out. I'd want someone else to do it, break the news, and then that way they're not involved. And you just convince yourself of all these odd things. But one day in particular, I was just done. It had been 2 weeks of just struggling. It would take a month for me to memorize a verse that other people could memorize in a day, and I struggled a lot with that. I had no memory. There were times even in high school I'd look at my mom and people would be like, so where do you live? And I'd look at my mom because I couldn't remember my own home address. How I graduated high school is a miracle. But I just totally disconnected, totally lost, still in a way. And I made a commitment one day when it was particularly bad. I was like, I'm going to go do it. And I walked out towards the shed or the shop where my dad's guns were and where all the hunting things were. And I was like, today's the day. And I walk in and open up the door, walk in, and it was my grandpa who had taken the day off, and he was out there cleaning the guns. And instead of taking my life, I heard nothing about Jesus for the next 2.5, 3 hours. He just shared the Lord with me. how good the Lord was. He showed how even the ducks that they had mounted, he was like, I remember that one because we mounted that one because the day that like we had nothing, me and your dad sat and just prayed, spent time with the Lord for a good hour, and then all of a sudden all the ducks came. It was the greatest morning. So we mounted it to remember that the Lord is good and faithful and he answers prayer. And he just went through like life and all these things. And I went from being in this place to feeling like there was hope. Um, one moment in particular, I was getting ready to go to a discipleship group and hopped in my new car that I had got, which oddly enough, I won in a bet, not my proudest moment, but also I made a bet with my grandpa. I'll share this with you. Um, I was probably 11 or 12, and I came home from church or went to my grandparents' house for lunch after church. And my mom was teasing, like, I think there's this girl at church Wilson likes. And my grandpa was teasing me. He's like, have you kissed her yet? Have you kissed her yet? All these things. I'm just like, no. Because it's that awkward phase when it's like, I like girls, but like nobody else is going to know that. Like, I'll go to my grave with that truth. And so he's like, have you kissed her yet? No. You'll kiss a girl. No, I will not. I'm not going to. And he said, I guarantee you'll kiss a girl by the time you're 16. I said, I would never. He said, well, if you don't, I'll buy you a car. And now that you know how I got the car, you know that never happened. He even tried to bribe girls to kiss me, and they wouldn't. So got in my car, and I was, again, just struggling. I was like, God, if you want me alive, just show me. Like, because I've been interrupted, and I know that you love me and all these things, but if you want me alive and have a purpose for my life, I want to know. I rolled down my windows as I was driving down our road, approaching a stop and turn left, turn right, busy road. And our neighbor was mowing the lawn, and I hear this thud as I'm driving. And I watched this rock go right through my car right in front of my face as I finished that prayer. And it just, the reality of like sinking in that moment of like, if I would have been a split second faster, that would have gone right through that busy intersection. Who knows what would have happened? And it was just a direct answer to prayer, like, I want you here to me. Thank you. But the Lord continued to show up. And I felt a need on my heart to start discipling and to start leading. And so I grabbed my brother and a few of his friends, and we started meeting weekly and going through the same booklets that my pastor wrote, and just about the aspects of the Lord, what it meant to be a godly man, what it meant to understand God's nature and his character, what it meant to share the gospel. And we would just work through that systematically week after week after week. And to this day, I still have an entire shelf on my bookshelf down in my office that is full of those booklets that he took me through week by week. It's why I write the ones that I do now for the guys that I write. It's because that was poured into me, and it's like, here's what it looks like to disciple, and like, here's what it looks like to give accountability to be in God's word and to hide it in your heart. So, around 17 or still 15, 16, around that age, I finally laid out the plan for my life. It's like, I got to figure it out. I know what I'm doing. I had taken the personality quizzes. I had done all the things, and I'd taken even a class at our homeschool co-op that's like, let's figure out what kind of field you might be interested in. And so just kind of like was working through that. And I was like, I want to get into like management. I want to get into hospital management. Like, I want to make a difference in this world, and I want to do this. And so I went, and as a freshman, I ended up taking ACT, had a full ride as a freshman to be able to go to the college that I wanted to in my city. And my uncle was the leading cardiologist at the biggest hospital in the area. And he's like, if you want internships in the summer, I'll sign you up. If you want this, I'll sign you up. And it was just kind of like the path was just being paved. Lots of little hospitals within that network in the area, little ones that like a young guy could step into and like help. And I was willing to work my way up. I knew what it would look like, and I watched my dad, who had run several businesses from the time I was young, work his way up. No college education. He started as a mechanic, work his way up, start companies, and I knew the hard work it would take, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to be like my dad. And so I laid that out to my parents. I was like, here's my plan. Here's what I can do. I get to go to school for free. I'll get to start right at 18, and this is it. My parents were like, I'm glad you know what you want to do. That was kind of it. And that night, strangely enough, like I was the type of kid that never like woke up in the middle of the night. And so it was really weird when at 2, 3 in the morning, I wake up and I'm wide awake. And the first thing that popped into my head was the passage in Samuel where Samuel was woken by the Lord. And I was like, okay, well, maybe God woke me up. Maybe he wants to say something to me. And I just said, God, like, I'm here. Speak, for your servant is listening, right? And the Lord just, as clear and as close to an audible voice as could be, said, will you give me everything? And I said, yes, I'm yours. And without any effort to my memory at all, I went from on my back on my bed to on my face on the floor, just laid out before the Lord. And I said, I'll give you everything. Whatever you want, I'll do. He said, I want you to disciple youth and teach young men my word. I said, I'll do it. So hopped up off the floor, opened up the door. I don't know why my first inclination was go out of the room, but I looked down the hallway and my parents' light was on in their room, and I thought that was odd. So I went and knocked, and they're both sitting up in bed talking. I said, hey, can we talk? Are you guys up? And they're like, yeah, we just woke up. Don't really know why, but we're up. Let's talk. And I was like, I know why. So I walk in and I just share with them that. And my mom is typically a very like reserved, very like questions a lot of things, wants to know the plan, very administrative, very organized, very like all the things. And so but instead of asking a question, she goes, well, what you'll need to do right after high school is. I was like, I feel like the Lord's calling me into ministry. She was like, well, what you need to do. She hopped out of bed face to face and was like, you can go to Bible college? This is the day of. I had just said, I know the plan for my life. And she said, well, there's Bible colleges in California. I thought, ooh, that's warm. And then she was like, well, there's one in Hawaii. And I knew for my senior trip, that's where we were going because we had family. So I'm like, I got family and I can go to Hawaii and I can go to Bible college. I was like, warm, no big city. This is great. I hate the cold. And she said, and I just read in like a magazine or something that there's one in Indianapolis, I think. But I don't know that it's real. And in that moment, the Lord spoke to my heart, and I knew that's exactly where I was supposed to go. Whether it existed or not, I didn't know for a fact, but I knew God was calling me there. And so I said, that's where I'm going. I was like, good night, and went right back to bed. And the next morning, my mom cautioned me very quickly. She was like, hey, before you tell anyone, let's make sure it's real. Let's make sure it exists before you go. And so we looked it up online. She's like, I don't know if it is. They only have like 30 graduates. And it doesn't look like they have a lot of people enrolled. So I don't know if it's like running at the time. So she calls Rich Day, who was running the college. She was like, is this still going? Like, what's going on? Like, he was like, oh yeah, we're running. How many students do you have? About 12. Okay, well, my son's coming there after high school. We'll see you then. And hung up. And my senior year, we went to visit and came, and it was a very interesting time. And if you guys were here last week, you heard about my first day at Horizon, regrettably. But after that, I still just, in a way, it's like I had everything. I was on the basketball team. I was discipling young men in my youth group and in our school or in our homeschool group, and I was a part of a discipleship group. I had a car before all my friends. I had a lot of things going, but still just completely empty. Still, in a way, just like not knowing what in the world what was I supposed to do, and also still just struggling. I was really overweight, really like a lot shorter than all my friends. I was 5'2", 5'3", 70, 80 pounds overweight. And so all my friends were living life and doing all the things, and I couldn't remember my home address. I couldn't memorize scripture. I could do nothing. And then one day I walked into my parents' room, and I've never seen a look like this on my mom's face. And she was just like, are you okay? I was like, I'm fine. What's going on? She goes, we need to take you to the hospital right now. And I had turned completely yellow, but not jaundice. My eyes were fine, all these things. But she had a nursing degree, but had no idea what was going on. She was just like, this is wrong. So the next day we walked into the doctor's office, and within 5-6 minutes, he goes, I think I know what's going on, but like, let's test. So they took 20-something tubes of blood. Like, I just remember like still not understanding what in the world was going on. And he said, well, we'll let you know as soon as we can, but it's probably going to be a week before we get through all the testing to really confirm and get a plan and these things. It might be 2 weeks. And so went home, normal day, went to a event that night, came home, and my mom, on our home phone, I'm showing my age, on our home phone, not my mom's cell phone, we had a voicemail from him. He had called from his own personal cell number. I'd gotten our phone number and called and left a voicemail, and he said, hey, as soon as you can, I need to get Wilson back in here because with his numbers, he may not make it through the night. And so what I had was and have still is hypothyroidism, except my number, instead of falling between the 0.46, from what I remember, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, instead of ranging between 0.46 or 4.6 or somewhere in there, mine was 535. And so my doctor had shared how he had had thyroid cancer, and his number got up to 75, and they had to have his removed. And my grandpa had up in the teens, and it ended up in him being hospitalized. And so the doctor was like, I don't know what's going on. It's got to be a problem with the test. And so like, you just need to come back. And so I went in, started medication, and within like from that point, my parents kind of sheltered me for a little bit. They were like, like, you need to rest, you need to sleep, you need to be home. And so I lost 70 to 80 pounds in a month and a half, and went from not being able to eat anything because I had no diet, no metabolism, no hunger or anything, to like eating more than I had ever eaten in my life, and I was losing weight. And it was like I looked in the mirror every day and I could see a difference. And all of a sudden I could start remembering like addresses and things from school and memory verses and things that were all like coming back. It was like this well that had just been tapped. It was like it was all coming out. And so felt like I had a new lease on life in a way, and just like I have like the ability to like talk and converse with people, where I had just to sit and listen and just take in. Now it's like I could actually talk, because by the time I would used to think of things to contribute to the conversation, it was moved on. And so I lived in silence, and now I could actually like talk to people. And now when my brother would come up and push me or wrestle me and then run out of the room, and where he was used to me just like getting up and then sitting back down because I couldn't, now I chased him and tackled him, and we were even again. So when I to the point, even enough had changed in me that when I had led a guy when I was 16 or 17 to the Lord named Caleb, and he had been gone for a little bit at the same time I had been gone, and I came back, and about 3-4 years later, the change had been so drastic that later in life he was sharing about like his testimony. He was like, yeah, there was this guy named Wilson at our church. He's talking to me. He's like, there was this guy named Wilson at our church, and he led me to the Lord. And I just remember being so convicted by him that I went home and listed out and wrote down all my sins, gave my life to the Lord and all these things. And he goes, I wonder what happened to him. And I'm like, that was me. And he was like, no, it's not. Like, you're not him. Like, because of personality and everything that had changed, even my appearance, he thought there were 2 different Wilsons, and that one had just left the church. And so it was a beautiful thing to be able to sit with him and talk and be like, man, that's amazing. But moved here to Bible college right after I was 18. And I was still small enough. I think I was right around between 95 and 100 pounds and about 5'2", that Brett thought I was in junior high, and my parents were going to go to Bible college. And in fact, the principal or some of the teachers at the time tried to send me to detention because they would see me walking through the halls on my phone. And they'd be like, you're not supposed to be on your phone, this, that, and the other. And then they'd send me to detention or hand me a write-up. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought I was homeschooled. I didn't know how schools worked. I thought like you could just hand out detention to anyone, I guess. Like, so I'm like, okay. So I go to the principal, and he's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm going to detention. He goes like, why? Told me this, and just all the things. And so I basically like went through like that midlife or through everything in Bible college. And so God bless like Danny and Brett and TJ and all the guys that were there at the time, because they put up with me when I was crazy. So what's that? What year were you 18? When I was 18 or 19 was when I started Bible college. That was 2011. Okay. And so Brandon had just moved to St. Kitts, and so I started jumping in with Jordan at youth group. And back at the time, Corbin was little as can be, and so for him to be graduating high school, I know I'm really old now. So again, had my plans at the end of year or semester 1 in Bible college. I'm like, I can't wait to go back home. It's end of year 1. I'm like, I want to stay here. End of semester 3, I'm like, I'm going to be a missionary in St. Kitts. And then after semester 4, it's like I'm going home. And then by like midsummer, I'm like, I need to go back and like intern. Like I want to do youth ministry. And I felt like that was the calling God had on my life. And it was like, that's what I'm going to go do. So I interned with Jordan for a semester. And during that semester was when he announced that they were going to be moving to St. Kitts. And so when Brett took over as youth pastor, I was here and kind of the junior high youth pastor intern at the time. And so me and Brett like did ministry together for the first year. And I oddly enough, even through Bible college, I still struggled with depression, still suffered with being suicidal and those things from time to time. It wasn't nearly as often, but I think a lot of that had just been so deeply enrooted in me that still very legalistic. And I would go to Rich and I'd be like, I don't understand. I read my Bible for 30 minutes, like I set a timer. I set a timer and I pray for 30 minutes. And I set a timer and I listen for 30 minutes. Why won't God speak to me? And I treated God as if he owed me something if I had done something. It was transactional. And Rich, I think his piece of advice, if I remember correctly, is God can speak more in one sentence than he can in 1 year, or than you can get from him in 1 year on your own, something along those lines. And I just remember going back and reading one verse and it being just like, it was like fresh water, like I had just seen the Lord again. It was like, oh, God spoke. And so worked with Brett, and in the fall we went to an event up in Crawfordville, up in Lafayette, for Harvest America, a thing that Greg Laurie did, and was there helping, and ran into my lovely wife now, but ran into her and started talking to her. I had never like met her face to face, and she came up and just gave me this big hug and just started talking to me, telling me about life and all these things. And now that I know her well, I'm like, what were you doing? Because that wasn't like you at all. And so she told me she was going to go be a part of YWAM and travel the world serving the Lord and all these things. And I was like, that's amazing. It'd be really nice to get to know her, but she's leaving. Darn it. So then the next semester comes up, and then the McGays came back and visited at one point, and then like somehow I got back in touch with her, and I was like, man, it'd be really cool if she was at something like youth camp or something like that. And I was like, oh, she's traveling the world. It's not going to happen. And then I get to youth camp, and lo and behold, there she is. I was like, what are you doing here? So she had changed plans and changed organizations, and now she wasn't leaving until 2 weeks after. And by the end of youth camp, I was like, I think I just met my wife. But we left there knowing that she was going to be gone from the country for about 1.5 years, and it was like, okay, well, if this is what the Lord, wants to do, if we're just supposed to be friends and our brother and sister in Christ that walks through this next season of life and transition together, that's what it'll be. Because I'm going back home to work for my dad. I want to learn what it is to be a man and to work and to serve a family. I always just kind of watched that at a distance. I was like, I want to be right by him and watch that. And but if this is something different, maybe we'll end up together. And so, long story short, within that, like 3 years later, we got married. And but the first 1.5 years, we lived in different countries, and we never lived until we got married. We never lived less than 1.5 hours from each other. It was always long distance, but with each step closer, even when she was 1.5 hours, it's like, I don't have to see you every 3 months or 6 months. I get to see you like every weekend. This is the greatest. This is awesome. And it was incredible, very hard at some times, but the Lord was so faithful in it. And part of how God even used youth ministry, I hate to circle back, wish I would have been more linear in timeline, but the moment I had probably my biggest breakthrough with depression, suicide, and those things was when I started telling people. I had never talked to anyone about it. And I always kept it very close and shared it with Jordan one night. And I was like, can I share that with youth group? Like at your house tonight? He was going to host youth group on a Sunday night at his house. And he was like, sure, like if you need to or want to, like go for it. And I got to share. And they prayed over me, and I still have the picture to this day of all of us together. And just the ministry that was to have a body around me that loved and cared for me, like meant the world. It's part of why like my heart is to provide that for youth and to be that voice. Like I wish I would have had someone that talked to me. I didn't know that other people struggled with depression or suicide. I know now that lots of people did, and now that I've experienced it, I can look and be like, I know that they are. But no one had ever like talked about it or shared it. And so I want to be the one that busts that door down and say, here's what it looks like to struggle with that. Here's how the Lord delivers. Here's how the Lord is faithful. And I want to have that voice as much as I can. Right before we got married, I started working with a concrete company, and I'm going to fast forward through some of this because I love sharing the testimony of like how I came to Horizon, but went from valet and security at the hospital community north, and which I don't know why you would want a scrawny little guy like me doing security, but they asked, and so I did, and went from that to doing concrete and worked in that for about 3 years, and the last year I was there, I realized how bitter and angry I had become because it felt like every step afterwards, after I'd stopped interning, was a step away from ministry. Dealt with a lot of bitterness in my heart towards the Lord of like, why are you taking me further away from the thing that I felt like you called me to do? The last year I was there, I woke up every morning, and Whitney can tell you, I'd wake up and be like, I hate this. I don't want to go. Why won't the Lord let me go? And she'd be like, well, you have to look for a job. And I'm like, I know the Lord wants me to wait and to provide. I know he wants me to stay silent. But why is he doing this to me? I hate this. And a guy named Chris Cox, who was really good friends with Jordan, I think they were even in each other's weddings, called me up one day and he's like, hey, I have some concrete work at my house I'd love to have you come over and do. And so let's meet up on a rainy day when you're not working and talk. And we did. And got halfway through the numbers, and he goes, I got to be honest, I don't want concrete at my house at all. I want you to come work for me. This was my excuse to get you here. Jordan told me you're not happy where you are, and I want you to come work for me. And it was like, I know that now I have more fulfillment so much in what I do, but it was by far my favorite job I've ever had. I love working for Chris. Having that godly of a boss, it was made leaving it to come here so hard. During that time, while we were there, the Lord had tugged on our heart and just kind of for 2 years straight, just kind of cut heart ties here. Before the transition, we ended up leaving in the spring of or winter of 2020, which was a great time to start looking for a new church when all the churches shut down. So we left Horizon. No bitterness. There was not like, man, there's heresy and there's this. It was just like, man, what is God doing? God used my testimony of depression and suicidal and all these different things to link us back in with a young couple who he ended up struggling with that a lot. I spent a night or two at his house like dealing with him to keep him from like doing things he would regret, and giving his wife relief from like having to like worry about her husband. And so God used that time while we were gone, connected us with a white family who like Jordan and Kristen are really close with now. But our small group was led by Rick and Jackie Martin. And if you've been here long enough, you may know them. But Jackie got saved and was attending here. And then through women's ministry and different things, like in everyone praying, Rick ended up giving his life to the Lord. Bill did their marriage counseling and so much. And so when we go to this new church and we jump into this small group and he starts using like Billisms, and I'm like, I hear Bill, like things he's saying. I'm like, we shared that we went to Horizon. He goes, oh yeah, Bill, they did our marriage counseling and all these different things. It was really sweet. And then when we heard about Bill's stroke, man, it broke our heart. And came back to his kind of retirement announcement and some different things. And the Lord was stirring us up. We had sold stuff in all the rooms of our home pretty much, getting ready to move to the northwest side of Indy to be closer to my job, closer to our church, closer to her family, all these things. And we're like ready to go. And Rick and Jackie came with us to the kind of Bill's retirement celebration, July 3rd, 2021. Or I think it was 2022, right? 2022. And we were there and sitting with Rick and Jackie, and it was a really good time. But seeing all of you was awesome. And we were about to leave, and I walked up to Bill. I was like, Whitney, I have to tell Bill goodbye. Like, this might be the last time I see him. I hadn't seen him in forever, and so to see him go from all that he was to what he had become was really hard, because I love that man. But I just walked up and I said, Bill, I love you. Thank you so much for all that you've done. Like, I like, this doesn't exist. My purpose in life, all the things that I've done don't happen the way that they have. Maybe I don't meet Whitney if Bill doesn't walk out in obedience, right? Just felt tremendous gratitude to him. So I said, thank you. And I'm expecting a you're welcome or I love you. And he goes, has Jordan talked to you about a job? And I had been subbing basically for Caleb Garcia, who was the junior high youth pastor, while he was in Texas. And so I was like, no, he hasn't. I'm just subbing for Caleb. I'm thinking he thinks I'm Caleb. Now looking back, it's like, well, I'm not that tall and I'm not Hispanic. So I don't know how he got us mixed up. Maybe I don't know. But I'm like, no, I'm just subbing. And he goes, I know. Has Jordan talked to you about a job? I'm like, no. He goes, well, listen to the voice of the Lord. And he said nothing else. And I walked out, like, I couldn't even wait to get to the car. I'm like, Whitney, we get to the car. I'm like, get in. And so we get in. I'm like, Bill just told me, like, Jordan wants to ask me about a job. And like, then he said, follow the voice of the Lord. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And so just said, okay, well, if Jordan wants to ask, he'll ask. I'm not going to go to him and be like, well, so I hear you want to talk to me about a job. Like, I'm not going to do that. And so I just leave it and nothing happens. A few weeks go by and I'm like, okay, well, then it was nothing. If Jordan was going to come talk to me, he was going to talk to me. So then Whitney goes to this concert one night and she's there. And out of the thousands of people there, Melanie Willard just sitting a couple, feet behind her basically, because it was just in a big lawn area. And so Whitney tells her this story kind of like as a ha, can you believe that Bill did this? And Melanie goes, no, I think that's pretty serious. And he's like, no, it's like a joke. Like, Bill didn't mean that. And she was like, Bill hasn't been wrong on this stuff. Wilson needs to go talk to Jordan. So Whitney calls me in the middle of the concert and she's like, this just happened. And I'm like, if Jordan wants to talk, he'll come talk to me. And she was like, Melanie just told me if you don't, in 48 hours, she's going to go tell him. I was like, I don't think Melanie can wait that long. Melanie will tell him. Lo and behold, 12 hours pass. Jordan texts me and he goes, hey, can we come over and hang out and talk about this, that, and the other? I'm like, sure, why not? So Jordan comes over and he goes, hey, I have no idea what Bill is talking about. We haven't been planning on asking you about a job, but would you pray about praying about coming to be a youth pastor? I'll pray about praying about it, but that's not going to happen. And so kind of leave it at that. A week goes by, nothing. I'm like, okay, maybe it was nothing. I still didn't feel like this huge calling. Whitney's like, I think that this is, like, if Bill's saying this is happening, like, this feels like a no-brainer. My neighbors are like, this isn't a no-brainer. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not a no-brainer. I'm happy where I am. I love our church. Like, there's ministry opportunities. The day he called, I got the dream truck I did from my job, and I got offered a position to teach at our new church. And I was like, but I'd never done any ministry there. They just came up and they're like, hey, we hear you're a good teacher. Why don't you come teach? I'm like, I have never taught here. Okay. So I taught at Sunday school and was doing all the things. And Jordan comes back and goes, hey, I want you to pray about it. And he goes, I want you to pray about being the senior high youth pastor. I'm like, what's happening to Brett? And he goes, just pray about that. He's just pray about this. Somebody else is probably going to come be junior high youth pastor. And the Lord broke my heart in a way because I loved where I was. And I was like, I don't know how to tell Chris this. And Jordan goes, I'll tell him. We're good friends. I don't want him to feel like I'm just going behind his back. So Jordan did, and the call did not go well. I'll put it that way. Because Chris was like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, that's fine. In a good way. He was not mad, but like, no, like, that's not going to happen. So then I meet with Chris, and Chris goes, okay, tell me what's going on. I just tell him, like, all that's been happening. And I had gone to Bill even and said, I don't know what to do about this. And I had told Whitney my worst like case scenario for this is that God brings me to a path and he goes, pick, go left and I'll bless you in business and all the things that you're doing, or go right and go into ministry. And I didn't know how much I'd be getting paid. I had no idea what it would look like. And I was like, that's my worst case scenario. I go to Bill and Vi walks out and she goes, you know what this reminds me of is when God brought us to this Y and we had to choose between doing business or going into ministry. And I'm like, I don't want that. So I'm like, Bill, I don't know what to do. And he goes, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. And he goes, yes, you do. It's like, I want to go into ministry. And he's like, what do you want? What do you think the Lord wants you to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, yes, you do. I think the Lord wants me to go into ministry. And he goes, then do it. So we walked out. I called up Jordan. It's like, hey, I think we want to do this. And so, huge leap of faith. No idea what we were going to be doing or getting into. It was right around the time we had prayed, and we're kind of seeing forward with doing Family Hope and all the things. And but when I talked to Chris and told him all these things and just laid it all out there to him, Chris's resolve was, well, sounds like that's what the Lord's doing, and I don't want to get in God's way. You need to go. And so it went from me making a decision because I was like, God, I just want you to pick. I know I'm not getting fired from where I am, but I just want you to pick. So then my boss basically says, you need to go, and I just need you for 3 weeks. Go. It's like, okay, that's what I'm doing. And so we end up, staying in our home where we are, less than a few minutes away from here. We never moved. Jumped into youth ministry without having a clue what we're doing. And so 2.5 later, here we are. It's almost 3 years this fall. But that's essentially the way that the Lord has just continued to show up. He provided verses during every single one of those seasons. God was more than willing and able to speak through a whole bunch of different avenues. Like he spoke through people, he spoke through his word, he spoke through worship, he spoke through moments alone, he spoke through moments corporately. And so if I can give you one kind of takeaway, if I will, is just don't put a limit into where or when or how God will speak to you. Because if my life has taught me anything at this point, is that he'll speak through whatever way I'm willing to listen. And so it normally just starts with saying, God, I just need you to show me. And then he speaks, whether it's through a rock through a window, versus my boss basically telling me, not that I'm fired, but that like I need to go. Just whatever it is, God's always been willing to speak as long as I was willing to listen. So that's pretty much all I have for you here. And one quote recently that spoke out to me is that God's plan for your life isn't a career path, it's the posture of your heart. And so just check the posture of your heart. That's what he wants to guide. So I think that's it. Can I pray? Dear Lord, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for saving my life, Lord, in every sense of the word. And so, God, I thank you that I'm here. I want every breath, every moment, every word to give you glory, and forgive me where I fall short in that. God, my life is yours. I would hope and pray that if this says anything, it stirs us up as a group, Lord, just in hearing what you've done, not what I've done, Lord, that we would draw closer to you and that we would be that willing to hear from you. Lord, we love you. We need you. In Jesus' name, amen.